The sun had barely crested the horizon when Clara Whitford stepped out into the biting winter air. Frost clung to the bare branches overhead, glittering in the pale morning light. Her breath puffed in small clouds as she made her way toward the river, the wooden bucket swinging lightly at her side. Fetching water was a daily chore, one she preferred to do early before the small path to the river grew busy with other villagers. Snow crunched under her boots, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke from distant chimneys, and somewhere far off, a crow called into the silence. Clara's cabin sat on the outskirts of the village, near enough to the woods that she could hear the wind rush through the pines. She liked it that way, away from the gossip, away from the questions about why she lived alone. As she reached the riverbank, she knelt by the frozen edge. The water, dark and slow-moving beneath a thin crust of ice, mirrored the pale winter sky. She cracked through with the end of a stick, lowering her bucket carefully into the frigid water. That was when she heard it, a rustle of branches, faint but close. She froze, every instinct urging her to stay still. The sound came again, heavier this time, as if someone was stumbling through the undergrowth. She straightened slowly, her eyes scanning the snowy tree-line. A figure emerged from the woods, his coat torn and spattered with mud and blood. He staggered forward, one hand clutching his side. His face was pale beneath the grime, and his breath came in ragged bursts. Clara's first thought was to run. British patrols had been sweeping the area for days, and this could be trouble she didn't need. But before she could move, the man collapsed forward, catching himself just enough to stop from falling face first into the snow. His eyes found hers, desperate and sharp despite the pain. "Please," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "Don't let them find me." Clara's heartbeat quickened. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see red-coated soldiers emerging from the trees. The woods behind him were still, but she knew that meant little. The British were thorough, and they'd been relentless lately, especially after reports of a skirmish nearby. The man tried to rise but faltered, sinking to his knees. Instinct warred with caution in Clara's mind. Every villager knew harboring a rebel soldier could mean imprisonment, or worse. Yet something in his expression, the sheer urgency of his plea, kept her rooted to the spot. "Can you stand?" she asked, her voice low. He shook his head once, grimacing. "Not for long." Clara's eyes darted again toward the woods. If she left him here, he'd be dead within the hour, either from the cold or a musket ball. Without another word, she stooped, draping his arm over her shoulder. He was heavier than she expected, and every step back toward her cabin felt like a battle. By the time they reached her door, Clara's arms ached from his weight, and her heart pounded from more than just the effort. She pushed the door open, ushering him inside. The warmth of the small fire she'd left burning greeted them, along with the scent of pine logs crackling in the hearth. "Sit," she urged, helping him to the chair by the fire. He slumped into it, sweat beading on his brow despite the cold. "Name's Nathaniel," he managed between breaths. "Continental Army." Clara swallowed hard. She'd guessed as much, but hearing it made the danger all the more real. Outside, somewhere beyond the woods, she thought she heard the distant echo of boots crunching on snow. Clara didn't need to be told twice. She knew the sound of soldiers on the move. She crossed quickly to the window, peering through a narrow gap in the shutters. The tree line was still far enough, but the dark shapes moving between the trunks were unmistakable. Redcoats. Her stomach tightened. "We don't have much time," she said, turning back to Nathaniel. He looked weaker now, his head resting against the chair. The wound on his side had bled through the cloth, staining it a deep crimson. "If they find me here..." His voice trailed off, but he didn't need to finish. Clara's cabin was small, 2 rooms and a loft. There was no basement, but her father had built a crawl space beneath the floor, accessible by lifting a loose plank near the hearth. It had been meant for storing root vegetables during the winter, but it might just be enough to hide a man. "Come on," she said, moving quickly to the hearth. She slid the rug aside and knelt, prying up the plank with a hidden hook. The cold, earthy smell from the narrow space below met her immediately. "You'll have to lie very still, and no matter what you hear, don't make a sound." Nathaniel tried to push himself up, grimacing at the movement. She helped him, guiding him toward the opening. His boots scraped against the wooden floor, each sound making her wince. He lowered himself awkwardly into the darkness, curling as tightly as his injury would allow. Clara replaced the plank, sliding the rug back over it. She tossed a few more logs into the fire, the crackling masking the faint noises from beneath the floor. She had barely straightened when there was a knock, a sharp, authoritative rap that made her heart leap. She opened the door to find Abigail Turner standing on her porch, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Clara," she whispered urgently, glancing over her shoulder. "British patrols coming. They're searching every house." Clara kept her voice calm. "I've nothing here worth searching." "That won't matter to them," Abigail warned. "They're looking for someone, say he escaped from the skirmish near the pass." Her eyes flicked to Clara's, reading her too well. "Clara, you didn't." Before Clara could answer, the sound of boots approached. 2 redcoats rounded the corner of the cabin, muskets slung over their shoulders. The taller of the 2 stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said briskly, "we're under orders to search the premises. We're looking for a rebel soldier, wounded, possibly armed." Clara stepped back, forcing her hands to remain steady. "You're welcome to look, but you'll find nothing." The soldiers entered, their boots thudding against the floorboards. One moved toward the small sleeping loft, the other checked behind the cupboards. Clara's pulse raced as one of them paused near the hearth, the very spot beneath which Nathaniel lay. The soldier glanced at the fire, then back at her. "You live alone?" "Yes," she replied evenly, meeting his gaze. He hesitated as if weighing her answer, then finally turned away. "All clear," he called to his companion. Within moments they were gone, their boots crunching in the snow outside. Clara didn't move until she could no longer hear them. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding, her knees weak. Nathaniel was safe for now. But she knew they'd be back. And next time they might not leave so easily. The knock came just after midday, sharp and deliberate, echoing through the small cabin. Clara froze, her spoon halfway to the pot over the fire. It had only been a few hours since the patrol left. She knew this wasn't a friendly visit. She crossed to the door, bracing herself before opening it. This time, Sergeant Wilkes himself stood there, a tall man with a stern face and eyes that missed nothing. 4 soldiers flanked him, muskets in hand. "Miss Whitford," he said in a clipped tone, "we've received new information. It suggests the fugitive we seek may have passed through this area. Possibly into your home." Clara met his gaze evenly. "You already searched. You found nothing." Wilkes' mouth twitched in something almost like a smile, but it held no warmth. "Sometimes we miss things the first time. We'll search again, thoroughly." He stepped past her without waiting for an invitation. 2 soldiers followed, immediately moving toward the loft. Another began tapping at the floorboards with the butt of his musket. Clara's chest tightened. She positioned herself near the hearth, trying to appear casual. "What exactly do you think you'll find?" she asked, keeping her tone calm. Wilkes studied her, as though weighing her every word. A man, wounded, desperate. He wouldn't get far on his own. Someone would have to hide him, feed him. His eyes flicked toward the pot over the fire. "I see you're cooking enough for 2. Clara's mind raced. "I've always cooked extra," she lied smoothly. "It lasts longer that way." Outside, the sound of boots crunching in the snow grew louder, more men surrounding the cabin. The soldiers inside moved slower now, checking every corner. The one by the hearth lingered, his boots scraping the rug that concealed the loose plank. "Lift it," Wilkes ordered. The soldier bent down, fingers brushing the rug aside. Clara's heart pounded in her ears. She took a step forward. "You'll let all the heat out of my home for nothing," she said sharply. Wilkes ignored her, nodding to the soldier. The man gripped the edge of the plank, then paused as a gust of wind rattled the shutters. Another soldier burst through the doorway. "Sergeant! Snow's coming in heavy, visibility's dropping fast. If we don't move, we'll lose the trail entirely." Wilkes hesitated, glancing at the window where fat flakes were already falling thick and fast. After a long moment he straightened. "We'll resume the search after the storm. Post 2 men outside, she doesn't leave." The soldiers filed out, but Clara knew they hadn't gone far. Through the small gap in the shutters, she saw them setting up positions around her cabin, their muskets glinting in the pale light. Beneath the floor, Nathaniel shifted slightly, and Clara crouched by the hearth, her voice low enough only he could hear. "The storm's our only chance. When it gets bad enough, we'll run." She glanced again outside. The snow was falling harder now, the world blurring into white. Time was running out for both of them. By nightfall, the storm had swallowed the world. Snow whirled in dense, swirling sheets, piling high against the cabin walls. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the shutters like a warning. It was the kind of night no sane person would travel in, precisely why Clara had been waiting for it. She knelt by the hearth, lifting the plank with careful hands. Nathaniel's pale face appeared from the darkness below. "Is it time?" he whispered, his voice raspy but determined. "It's now or never," she said. "They'll be half blind in this weather." He pushed himself up with a grimace, and Clara helped him to his feet. He was still weak, leaning heavily on her shoulder, but his eyes burned with resolve. She handed him a thick wool cloak, her father's old hunting wrap, and a length of scarf to hide his face. Clara blew out the lamp, plunging the cabin into darkness. She eased the door open. Snowflakes struck her cheeks like tiny shards of ice, and the wind tugged at her cloak. The shapes of the soldiers' posts were barely visible through the swirling snow, their outlines blurred, their heads bowed against the cold. They slipped out the back, moving slowly through the drifts. Every step sank deep, and Nathaniel's breath came fast. Clara kept her eyes fixed on the tree line ahead, where the shadows of the woods loomed like a promise of safety. They had nearly reached the first stand of pines when a shout rose behind them. "There! Stop!" The crack of a musket shattered the muffled quiet, the ball whistling past to bury itself in the snow. Clara didn't look back. "Faster!" she urged, half dragging him forward. The storm became their ally, wrapping them in white. Branches whipped at their faces as they plunged into the trees. Behind them, the soldiers cursed, their voices growing fainter with each step. Nathaniel stumbled, dropping to one knee, but Clara pulled him up, her hands numb, her breath searing her lungs. They reached a small ravine where a frozen creek ran beneath a crust of ice. Clara guided him down into it, crouching low. The snow was already covering their tracks. "We'll follow this until it bends," she said between gasps. "Then they'll lose us." For nearly an hour they moved along the creek, the wind howling above. When they finally emerged into a clearing on the far side of the ridge, Nathaniel stopped, gripping her arm. "You've done more than I can repay," he said, his voice thick. "You can repay me by staying alive," she replied, forcing a small smile. He hesitated, then reached into his coat, pressing something into her hand, a small brass button, engraved with the emblem of his regiment. "So you'll know I kept my promise if we meet again." Clara tucked it into her pocket, her fingers lingering on the cold metal. She watched as Nathaniel disappeared into the snow, his figure swallowed by the storm. Alone in the clearing, she pulled her cloak tighter, listening to the wind. Somewhere beyond the white curtain, Muskets still searched for them. But for tonight, the storm had kept its secret.